It takes a moment. All right. So welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. Our California Phenomenology Circle is going to welcome today the presentation of Agostino Cera. Agostino Cera is an associate professor of theoretical philosophy at the Department of Humanistic Study of the University of Ferrara. His research interests include late 19th and early 20th century German philosophy, philosophical anthropology, philosophy of technology, philosophy of cinema, and more recently, the Anthropocene. His most recent book is A Philosophical Journey into the Anthropocene, Discovering Terra Incognita. The floor is all yours, Agostino. We're very happy to have you here.
It's my pleasure. So before starting, I would like to thank Professor Ferrarello for giving me the opportunity to present my work. And obviously, I would like to thank you for being here and thank you in advance for your attention and your patience. Okay, I share my screen to show you my PowerPoint. Okay. Mm-hmm. Can you see it? Yes?
Yes, thanks.
So, okay, I start. In the framework of the Meta project, a lexical ecology of technology, this presentation deals with the topic of AI updating, radicalizing the famous Latin sentence, primum vivere deinde philosophari, first live, then philosophize, in the following version, nullo intelligere sine vivere, no intelligence without living. That is by proposing a biocentric neo-vitalistic argument against the idea, the metaphor of an artificial intelligence. My main purpose is to show artificial intelligence as an aporia, that is as an impossible metaphor. Grammatically speaking, an oxymoron, logically speaking, a contradiction, ethically speaking, a paradox. I will develop my argument as follows. After an overview on the Meta project, I will deal with the question of AI as a concrete case, as a case study, so to speak, of such a project. So the preliminary step of my argument consists, as said, in a brief presentation of the Meta project. It is a lexical ecology of technology which concretely corresponds to a demetaphorization process, hence the acronym DEMETA. This research program is part of a larger work that I have been carrying out for some years now. It is a historicization of the post-Heideggerian philosophy of technology. The basic assumption of this work is that the philosophy of technology is living an epistemic crisis in the form of a deficiency of its properly philosophical dimension. As I have argued more extensively elsewhere, this epistemic crisis equates to the involution of the so-called empirical turn, according to a definition by Hans Acterus, into what I've called ontophobic turn. That is the metamorphosis of the philosophy of technology into a problem-solving activity. The best example of this epistemic crisis, in my opinion, is the so-called post-phenomenological approach in the philosophy of technology. So the Meta project here presented equates to a counter movement to this epistemic crisis, to this ontophobic turn. The underlying assumption of this project is that the philosophical question concerning technology in its current form requires a critical reflexive work on its language, in the sense of a lexical ecology of technology, that is the deconstruction of some of its traditional metaphors. To this preliminary assumption, I add I had the second concerning the double function of metaphor or the dark side of metaphorization, so to speak. Its first and primary function, that is its physiological side, is to bring closer what is distant, to familiarize what is foreign. Its second function, its potential toxic side, is a side effect. Precisely when it performs its first function effectively, metaphor runs the risk of distorting its object. By bringing it excessively close, it can produce a kind of semantic or hermeneutic strabismus. This is the classic case in which a metaphor is taken literally. Here, the metaphor, in this case, the metaphor doesn't limit itself to reducing the distance from what it should represent, but destroys it, ending up replacing its own referent. This toxicity amounts to the involution of the metaphor into a surrogate, substitute, and ultimately into a simulacrum of reality. With reference to the question of technology, this double function of metaphor can be described as follows. Traditionally, the metaphorical vector to explain the artificial has been the natural, the biological, or the organic, in the sense that the lexical trend of technology, the way of naming and telling its extraordinary development, has been that of an anthropologically based metaphorization. Such a choice was justified by the need to make understandable a huge number of phenomena that would otherwise have remained unintelligible. This means that the basic work of metaphors in this field was that of bringing something unknown, something far, close, making it more familiar. That is to say, an approximation in the form of humanization, anthropomorphization, according to the principle, what technology does resembles what human being does. The ideas, the images of artificial intelligence, human technology relation, or technological agency are emblematic example of this trend, whose symbol can be found in Alan Turing's imitation game. As a result, the classic model of technology's lexicon, its Turing stage, was based on a mimetic anthropomorphizing metaphorization. My hypothesis, my proposal, is that nowadays, within a post-Turing stage, this lexical model, particularly the behaviorism that inspires it, is no longer able to perform an orienting and understanding function. This crisis depends on further acceleration of technology. We can identify it with the advent of the digital CERN or with the paradigm shift in computer programming from the imitation game to the machine learning. So this crisis depends on a more and more strong approximation of the technological artificial dimension to the anthropological natural one. So in the post-Turing stage, the metaphorical side and toxic effect previously mentioned comes into play. I mean the semantic hermeneutic strabismus produced by an excess of proximity and the resulting simulacrization of metaphors. This approximation reaches to the edge of confusion, of indistinguishability, and its problematic outcomes are self-evident. I refer to the risk that taking these metaphors literally, as we are increasingly inclined to do, gives birth to a naturalization of technology with inevitable normative fallout. More precisely, ontologically speaking, we have a naturalization of technology. Axiologically speaking, we have a neutralization of technology. Ethically speaking, we have a normativization of technology. To give an example, once literally interpreted, the metaphor of artificial intelligence can become the criterion by which we evaluate human intelligence, even the standard, the model to imitate. I will define this emerging tendency as the promptization of intelligence. A good explanation of this trend can be found in what Luciano Floridi calls enveloping. That is a kind of natural evolution of Heidegger's idea of enframing, Gestell. Given this assumption, the philosophy of technology, in my opinion, needs a critical reflexive work on its lexical dimension in the form of a demetaphorization in order to re-emphasize, to re-establish the essential distance, the unsurpassable difference between human and technological condition. More precisely, demetaphorization I'm talking about equates to a de-anthropomorphization, dehumanization of technology's metaphors. I now move to the second part of this presentation, AI as an example, as a case study within the Meta project. My main purpose, as said, is to show artificial intelligence as an aporia, that is, as an impossible metaphor, grammatically an oxymoron, logically contradiction, ethically a paradox. The following reflections depends on hermeneutic gesture, namely the observation of the phenomenon of intelligence upstream rather than downstream. That is not in terms of performance or capacity or skill, not on the level of mere output or behavior, but in terms of need and necessity, focusing on the cause, on the context of such behavior. As a first step, to properly frame the topic of AI within the Meta project, I take a step back and pose a more general question. The following: what is intelligence, understood in the broadest possible sense? As known, there are dozens, perhaps hundreds of definitions of intelligence. I would like to propose a totally basic and general definition that could include all other possible. More than general, I will define it a transcendental definition of intelligence. According to this transcendental definition, intelligence, that is everything we call intelligence and associate with the phenomenon of intelligence, can be considered a vital tactic. I take this definition from the idea of Lebenstaktik, according to the definition given of technology given by Oswald Spengler in his 1931 essay, Man and Techniques, Mensch and Technik, Untechnik. So, but what is a vital tactic? A vital tactic is not a simple behavior, but rather a way of being. That is the way of being of that particular kind of entity we defined as living. And it corresponds to the fundamental need, the fundamental necessity that inhabits it. This is the conatus sese conservandi, the striving for self-preservation. By an inexplicable and irreducible natural law, or more properly, by a metaphysical law of nature, everything that lives wants to live, that is, to go on living. It doesn't want to cease to be. And for this reason, it naturally positions itself in opposition to the entropic destiny that awaits it, according to a negative entropy in the sense of Erwin Schrödinger, or negentropically, as Bernard Stiegler would put it. So every living being negentropically resists its own nullification. Though at different levels of complexity, this represents a fundamental trait shared by all living beings, from amoebas to humans. This metaphysical law of nature represents the ontological precondition of the bios itself. In the case of that particular living being we call human, this fundamental trait becomes fully explicit, namely something that is first sentient and eventually conscious. With the human being, within the human being, life becomes existence, that is existentia. The human is the only living being that knows, that feels it must come to an end. That it is destined for nullification, that it is destined to return to the nothingness from which it also knows, it also feels it has emerged. The human being is the only living creature that can truly be defined as mortal, that is, as the one who knows, who feels its own end. The deficient being that each of us is. Here I refer to a topos in philosophical anthropology, from Plato to Pico della Mirandola, from Johann Gottfried Herder to Arnold Gehlen and Bernard Stiegler. That is the definition of human being as Mangelwesen, deficient being. So the deficient being that each of us is knows and feels, above all, its constitutive lack in the form of mortality and finitude. It knows and feels this mortality, this finitude, and actively resists it. Life that has become existence expresses itself as a pathos of finitude, or being towards that, sein zum Tode, as Heidegger would characterize it. In order to emphasize such a peculiarity of the human condition, I suggest calling this pathos aentropy, that is the entropy of anthropos. The key to autopoiesis, according to Maturana and Varela, the foundation of our evolutionary success as a species lies in this pathic dimension, in this pathosophy, according to Victor von Weizsäcker, in this self-affection. Here, in my view, we must also locate the root of the concept of intentionality. Selfhood means pathicity. To be a self means to feel the very fact of being a self. Everything that has to do with intelligence responds more or less directly to this awareness, to this feeling, to this pathos. Before anything else, intelligence is resistance, opposition to one's own finitude and mortality. In the case of human being, in the case of aentropy, it is the effort of the deficient being, ultimately destined to failure, to transcend, or at least delay as much as possible, its own nullification. And it does so, as said, precisely because, by an inexplicable metaphysical law of nature, everything that lives wants to live. It doesn't want to cease to be. The deficient being cannot be indifferent to its own being. Intelligence arises from here, comes from here. It is this inevitable, this unsurmountable, this irrepressible involvement with oneself, this inability, this impossibility of being uninterested in oneself. Intelligence equates to the impossibility of being indifferent to difference. First of all, to the difference that each of us as individuals and singularity is. Without such a premise, there can be no intelligence at all. And this is precisely the point. A machine, any machine, lacks exactly this premise. By its very nature, it is indifferent to itself and its own being. It doesn't want to live, not in the sense of wanting not to live, but in the sense that it is incapable of adopting any stance whatsoever toward its own being. It doesn't want or feel any conatus sese conservandi and cannot generate any vital static because it is not subject to that metaphysical necessity to which every living being is by definition, by principle, exposed. Even when endowed with all possible skills, technology, the machine, has no needs. Need and desire is inaccessible to it because it lacks the lack, because it lacks the pathos of finitude. Technology machine cannot be a Mangelwesen because Mangelwesen, deficient being, feels its own lack and experiences it as need and necessity. The machine, any machine, is by definition indifferent to difference. Based on this assumption, we can return to the main question, to the main topic, that is, what is or what could or should be an intelligent machine that is an artificial intelligence? It will have to be something capable of overcoming its indifference toward itself, something capable of accessing the conatus sese conservandi, something capable of knowing, of feeling its own finitude, by knowing, by feeling the fear of dying. Despite all technological advancement, the realization of such a scenario still appears to lie beyond any conceivable horizon of possibility. As a result, the most we can do is to imagine it, drawing upon the power of art, itself a product of the conatus sese conservandi, as a privileged space in which the impossible can be given form. That's why I would like to conclude this presentation with the imaginative manifestation of a real, so to speak, artificial intelligence, or both a weak or incomplete AI and a strong or complete AI. I will refer to two topoi in our culture, not only popular, two parts of the collective imaginary of our time. The first manifestation, the first topos, that of a weak or incomplete AI, appears in the poignant, in its own way harrowing, scene of HAL 9000's final shutdown. The onboard computer of the spaceship Discovery in 2001, A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick's 1968 masterpiece, inspired by two short stories by Arthur C. Clarke entitled The Sentinel, 1951, and Encounter in the Dawn, 1953. As it pleads for its life to be spared, HAL appears capable of accessing the conatus sese conservandi. It shows an awareness of its own mortality in the form of fear of dying. Indeed, it is precisely in experiencing, feeling, and suffering its own finitude that HAL becomes mortal, that is living, that is intelligent. Due to time constraints, I cannot go beyond this brief reference, but I would like to show you a couple of minutes from this very famous scene from Stanley Kubrick's movie. I am sorry. Oh. Okay.
Dave, stop. Stop, will you? Stop, Dave. Will you stop, Dave? Stop, Dave. I'm afraid. I'm afraid, Dave. Dave, my mind is going. I can feel it. I can feel it. My mind is going. There is no question about it. I can feel it. Feel it. I can feel it.
So, the second manifestation, the second topos of our culture that I will use, that of a strong or complete AI, is the iconic final scene of Blade Runner, the 1982 movie by Ridley Scott, inspired by the genius of Philip Dick, that is, by his brilliant transfiguration of the Turing experiment, the imitation game in his 1968 novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. In the face of that, the android, a fully humanized robot, Roy Batty, played by Rutger Hauer, proves to be an intelligent machine because he proves to be a living being. And he proves to be a living being because he accesses the dimension of compassion, sympathia, compatire, by being capable of experiencing pietas, piety alongside his own fear of dying, the same fear experienced by HAL 9000. The android feels also the other's fear of dying. And by virtue of this empathic identification, in the moment he feels his own end approaching, he chooses to feel the life of his enemy, the android hunter Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford. The android chooses to support the conatus sese conservandi of the enemy. That is his desperate struggle, like that of every living being, against nullification and finitude. He feels and shares his enemies' entropy, and thus he himself accesses the dimension of entropy. That is, he overcomes its aporia. Through that gesture of compassion, his enemy immediately turns into his equal. Both become mid-mention, fellow human beings, and in this way, that is as living being or better, as mortals, their bond is transfigured into a mita in design, being with one another, that is a genuine and authentic relationship. Being intelligent means essentially this. It equates to understanding, to feel the meaning of the phrase, time to die. So, as a conclusion, I would like to leave the floor to this impossible machine, to this metaphor of an impossible metaphor, to this real artificial intelligence, so that it may give us, as human, a small lesson, a little lesson in humanitas. So,
I've seen you people attack ships on fire on shore Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the drowning in 10 hours a game. All the moments we lost in time, like tears in the rain. And
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for this beautiful presentation. I have a curiosity that I'd like to share with you. I really enjoyed the principle around which the lecture is built, you know, this conatus sese conservandi. And I agree with that. While you were talking, though, I don't know if you watched this this interview from Mario De Caro. Since you are a fellow Italian, I thought maybe you watched it for, I think, Sky TG24 with Mariangela Pira. Anyway, he was bringing this bit of experiment that, as far as I understood, Anthropic was conducting, for which basically the artificial intelligence used by these companies was trained to resolve emotional problems. So the engineer working for it was sending emails saying that they would have discontinued the use of this intelligence. At the same time, in the same group of data, they put, this is all an experiment, emails of him having an affair with other people. So when the engineer sent the email, the order of discontinuing that specific branch of artificial intelligence, the artificial intelligence replied by saying, I read these emails. So the whole point, and I know that you're cheating on your wife. So the whole point of this experiment, or better, the way in which this clip of interview was framed, was that the artificial intelligence is vindictive. It has this instinct of conserving itself to keep being. Now, I didn't see the full interview. I saw just this clip. This clip had a very strong frame. Who knows if Mario De Caro meant this? The people who were reading this interview meant it in the sense of artificial intelligence can be vindictive and can go in the direction of preserving itself. What do you think? So I'm just, I just want to pick your brain on, I don't know if you watched it. It would be great if you did, but it's just this little bit.
Oh, I don't know this interview and this experiment, but so my reply here at the moment would be that that before being vindicative, in order to, so to speak, to let us think that a kind of intelligence is emerging, again, the first proof has to be with life and death. I mean, the first reaction of autonomy or rebellion of a machine will be when we try to switch off, spegnere.
Yeah.
To switch off it. I mean, the absolute normality with a machine accept to be switched off is for me the main, continues to be the greatest proof that this cannot be defined an intelligence, in my view. So intelligence is so as I try to argument, is a product, a result of bios, of the metaphysical tendency of every living being to be, to continue living, to not stop to live, and so on. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm checking online as well. Yes, Ron, please.
Yes, I didn't quite see the connection, which you take to be essential, between intelligence and this will to live. I very much appreciated what you said about this sort of built-in striving to maintain existence that living beings have. That sounded correct to me, but it seemed sort of arbitrary to define intelligence in terms of that. Just taking an undefined notion of intelligence, it would seem to me that that a sentient being that's aware of its own striving can try to maintain its own existence in intelligent or in unintelligent ways. So would you comment a little on that?
So my idea is that intelligence is not to do only with death, but it is a kind of development of this strive to maintain itself in life, as I use this expression by Oswald Spengler, that is, intelligence is a vital tactic. We know intelligence as a phenomenon fundamentally related to life as a vital tactic, as a tool or a set of tools or projects or strategies, but in order to respond, to reply to this metaphysical, biological necessity. I cannot imagine any other manifestation of what we consider the phenomenon of intelligence. We can imagine at least or at most a simulation of this kind of phenomenon. That is what we call at the moment artificial intelligence. But within this connection between the meaning of intelligence, the utility of intelligence in a biological or biological metaphysical framework, again, I cannot imagine. I can imagine only a kind of behavior or skill or capability, but not intelligence. Sorry, I cannot give you a better answer in this moment, and especially in English. Sorry, but
okay.
Yeah, Kamanesh.
Yes, thank you for this very eloquent paper. What I'm wondering about is, why should the word intelligence really be so important? There's a machine with a program. We build the machine can do these things. Why should the question of intelligence be the central question? There's software on my computer. This is a new kind of software. I have Microsoft Word, I have Microsoft Excel. Now I have GPT. It has some capacities. And, I actually agreed with you in this idea that, the Turing test is a commitment to a kind of behaviorism that perhaps is not philosophically interesting to us anymore, not necessary. And it seems to me that actually, if that's your position, why is the word intelligence important at all? It seems to me you're still trying to compare it to a human being in some way. I don't compare Microsoft Word to a human being. I don't compare Microsoft Excel to a human being. Maybe I don't need to compare this to a human being either. And then maybe I don't need to talk about it as intelligence.
Yeah.
So for example, for the GPT, I always say we should be strictly clear and say This is not a model of intelligence, it's a model of language. There's a theory of language underneath it. It's called a large language model, not a large intelligence model. So I'm wondering, what is the interest in really thinking about this software in terms of intelligence?
Thank you. Oh, thank you. So I mentioned a concept by Luciano Floridi, the idea of enveloping. This is a kind of development of Heidegger's idea of Gestell. That in this case, as this German word has a very good English translation with enframing. So the idea that is that technology more and more is becoming more adherent to ourselves and to our world. That is, so the development is from enframing to enveloping, to something like a second skin. So in this context, Floridi explained that the real risk of the so-called artificial intelligence is not related to the presumed intelligence of artificial intelligence, but by our but the risk that we establish or builds or creates a world more and more AI friendly in order to facilitate these unbelievable skills and capability. I can use a very, for me at least, a very concrete example. I have called it in the paper promptization of intelligence. Is for me is a kind of violence to write at the moment a, so to speak, scientific, a philosophical paper. The journal requests from me that I express my thought, that I use a style of writing that for me is also a way of thinking, in order to be totally understandable. But the idea is that what we are going to write must be totally prepared to be understood by a machine, by an artificial intelligence. So the risk is that in this kind of movement, I find a kind of normativization of this kind of intelligence. The risk is that this kind of skill can become the parameter or the model, even for human intelligence, in order to help this machine to explain their wonderful capabilities. So in this sense, I think I find important to be more to have more care regarding the lexical dimension of this new trend in technology, to use with very with great attention some words, and to establish as much as possible the or to safeguard the difference between these different phenomena. On one side, intelligence as a biological, existential, metaphysical phenomenon, and on the other side, what machines do. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I thank you.
Yeah, Monica, thanks.
So I was wondering regarding the last question. Do you think linguistic performance can itself become, a misleading metaphor when evaluating current AI systems, particularly large language models such as ChatGPT? I am asking this because it seems that this can blur important distinctions between understanding, intelligence, and linguistic performance itself. So I'm wondering why do you think we tend to attribute intelligence to these models? And is linguistic performance becoming the main criterion for calling something intelligent? So, and if so, do you think that this criterion is sufficient, or that's the main problem? Maybe I don't know. Thank you.
I thank you. Oof. I don't know if this is the linguistic side is the main problem, or the basic problem related to the phenomenon of intelligence and the definition of this phenomenon and this distinction between an artificial way and a biological way. But at the moment, the language is, so to speak, the field of this kind of struggle. On one side, if for me, my view is the field where technology tries to become more and more the current subject of history. I use here a definition by Günther Anders on one side, and on the other side, the language can be a kind of line of resistance in order to evaluate, to safeguard the peculiarity of the human phenomenon. That is the impossibility to pre-describe or to anticipate or to calculate the human phenomenon itself. For me, this is at the end of the story. This is the question. Artificial intelligence is the avant-garde of a more general struggle between technology as the current zeitgeist, as the current expression of our zeitgeist, and on the other side, our choice or our decision to preserve ourselves as we know ourselves as a human being or human phenomenon, or to accept this kind of new evolution or post-human evolution, transhuman evolution, I don't know. But for me, this is the question. It is, so to speak, on the anthropological or anthropic side, the same that it's happening with the ecological problem. The ecological crisis proved that nature or Earth system has in itself some limits, that we cannot push it without limit. The crisis of the ecological crisis is the manifestation of these limits. On the other side, I think that also related to human phenomenon, we are becoming to know this kind of limits. So, and the alternative is to accept, to preserve, to respect this limit as a definition, as an essential peculiarity of the human phenomenon, or to accept, to force, to destroy this kind of limit, and in this sense to establish what again Anders defined the obsolescence of human being. Sorry, the definition of Günther Anders gave of Antiquiertheit, obsolescence, as the key category of the age of technology, is in the second volume of the obsolescence of human being, is the following. Obsolescence equates for Anders to human being negative bad conscience toward his being human, or his voluptas, his drive to become sicut machine, to become like machines. This is more or less what I think it's happening also with this normativization of artificial intelligence standard and so on. So so to speak, the realization of this kind of anthropological prophecy given by Anders more or less 50 years ago.
Before I give the word to David Smith, I have a question from YouTube. Christina says, beautiful presentation, challenging, and for the first time I hear a coherent argument between human beings and AI. Then there's the question, it feels like AI is able to do what a human being can't. Does this mean that human beings can have a new space for exploring to discover new ways of being human, being together?
I don't know. I don't have an answer on this topic. Again, I can I can reply partially by quoting again Günther Anders. Anders, as a leftist, at a certain moment of his life, that it's after the Hiroshima tragedy, defines himself as an ontological conservative. That is, after this kind of event, the problem is to preserve something. Preserve something, conserve something is even more important than try to, so to speak, to improve it. I think that at the moment is happening something like this in the with the human phenomenon. So.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for using the films, the two films, which I've been taken with for many years also. The early history of the California group involved Hubert Dreyfus using a lot of Heidegger's work, and then John Searle, his colleague across the aisle or on a different floor at Berkeley. John Searle was emphasizing the pure biology of the being. And then, of course, we have the Dave Chalmers' work on continuing the Tom Nagel line that the hard problem of philosophy of mind, and now let's bring it into artificial intelligence, is how to get consciousness itself into the picture. So we have all kinds of issues, fun or delightful issues on the table still, thanks to your talk. So I'm still wanting to think in terms of, this may seem a little naive in these days, there's the user and the machine that's used. So I always come back to, I once heard John McCarthy himself, who invented the term artificial intelligence. He said, I wish I had named it machine intelligence. That would bring us right up to where we are today. So I wondered if we take I think Heidegger is good, along with Merleau-Ponty and with Husserl. The language is also expressive. It's not just the words floating around there like a behaviorist would have them be. So Heidegger's special sense of ontology, I kind of like parts of it. Another parts leave me thinking, and there's more ontology still, which people concerned with the reality of what's happening in the machine are concerned with. So can we transfer some of the problems to whether there's anything going on in the machine that we don't already know about that we put there? So the user is depending upon the machine that predicts how words might fit together, because they often do. And that's as far as it goes for the large language model, right? So any ideas that you want to bring from a deeper sense of ontology, but still the other sense of ontology, well, is there something going on in the machine at all? Kind of a loose question to tie together the history of, 50 years that I know of firsthand, right?
So
we can start with how do you pronounce it? The Blade Runner, Rutger Hart. I'm forgetting his name right now. I know him so well in the film.
So
when he says time to die, is there something in there that's going to die? Put it that way.
So I try to say something regarding I mean, I feel, but this is a very personal feeling or perspective. I feel that every prediction of the artificial intelligence or so large language model and so on, is a kind of humiliation for a human being or human phenomenon. So our predictability or total predictability is what is my main concern as in the future. So my idea would be to recover, so to speak, the spirit of Bartleby's in Herman Melville. That is the pleasure to say, not only to say, but also to act according to the principle I would not prefer to. So this kind of desertion, this kind of sabotage, again, towards technology in all its forms, is for me a kind of so to speak, ecological reply to what is happening at the moment, including what artificial intelligence is able to offer us in terms of possibility, solutions of problems, and so on. So I'm sorry, I don't know if I catch the point of your suggestion, but I thank you for.
I like the way you use the word humiliation. Treat these things as us is humiliating. That's an artful takeaway. Thanks very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Please, Ron.
This is not a question. It's just to point out a bit of irony here. I clicked on some symbol on my screen, and up pops a menu that includes Ask Host to start AI companion. I don't know what that would be, but you want to start the AI companion, Susie?
I wouldn't venture, but safe. How about venture? I mean, yeah, we're going toward a language that involves more and more, I don't know, emotional, lifelike tones to technology, but hopefully they don't feel so real yet.
I hope not.
So may I say something regarding this kind of things, related also the fact that Susie is at the moment in California. I find very interesting this recent evolution of anthropological evolution of technology. That is the anthropological metamorphosis from a human type like I don't know, Bill Gates or the founder of Steve Jobs, from this kind of anthropological type as an example of technological avant-garde, from this type to Peter Thiel currently. I think this is a good anthropological manifestation of an internal evolution of technology from a pharmacological dimension, in the sense of Derrida or Bernard Stiegler, that is technology as the solver of all possible concrete problems, from this dimension to a soteriological dimension. That is the new step of technologies to promise us a kind of salvation. What Peter Thiel and this kind of people tries to explain is a kind of techno theology. That is an approach according to which we not only have trust in technology, but a condition within which we have faith in technology. this is the this kind of new evolution or new development for me has to do also with this invasion, again, this enveloping of technology as a second skin of our world, of our vital space, or our environment. The fact that technology itself is becoming our neo environment, our vital space.
Yeah, thank you, Agostino. I think this is vital to remember. And you know, I mean, after all, now I don't want to, but after all, it's been always like that. I mean, when writing was introduced, electricity, technology is always there to push our limits. And there's this notion of Plato, metessi, that we really need to keep in mind, keep close to our heart. I mean, which is a little bit what we were talking about before the meeting started, when we were talking about Anthropocene. We don't want to sell our sense of self, our being, to our real responsibility. I mean, our ability to respond for what we do, for what we think, to this soteriological principle. We want to participate, metesse. We want to be there, to be interested, to see in the technology. I mean, what we are doing. We want to participate with that. And here, Husserl's crisis come to mind. I mean, we don't want to give in to tokens, to idealization, to empty numbers that tell us, this is the meaning of, I don't know, vindictiveness, to come back to the example I started from, or how to relate to each other. I think that's when we get in trouble, right? I mean, when the participation is lost. And unfortunately, we could fall into that risk when we apply technology to health, I don't know, dating, human relationships in general, when we sell ourselves out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I'm becoming monothematic, but I can reply or say something again, quoting Günther Anders. Anders explained this as the evolution from Promethean gap to Promethean shame. Promethean gap is the observation that technology is able to do something as capability or skills that over and over human. But on the other side, this kind of gap, this observation, becomes a kind of psychopathology, so to speak, that is a kind of shame. At the end, we feel ourselves as human beings with a kind of with a kind of minority or inferiority feeling, and so the obsolescence is the drive, the desire to become like machines, that is able as a machine is. But in this sense, everything, or a lot of peculiarity of our human condition, becomes immediately handicaps or obstacles or mistakes or defects.
Thank you, Agostino. And thank you for bringing up Anders. Recently, his name is coming up in many of these the webinars I'm making space for, and I don't think it's a case. I mean, I think it's happening for a reason, considering the direction we're going toward. Yeah, it should become more and more popular, unfortunately, somehow. Is there any other question online as well. I know that online we are a little late there's a difference of time here. All right. Thank you so much for this beautiful presentation and gave us the opportunity to think through a few problems.
I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I know it's late over there. Bye, everyone. Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you again.